This is the Capitol Rundown.
The pollsters are quick to say that a poll is only a snapshot in time, that you can only look at what happened in that photograph.
We have a right to exist while we are pushing to ensure that we have the same health benefits as everybody else.
The strongest economy in the whole damn world.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. From Lansing to Washington, D.C., a lot happened this week in Michigan politics, so let's get you caught up. And we start this morning with the group called End Citizens United filing a complaint with the state attorney general against the No Labels political organization. No Labels members describe the group as a common sense centrist organization. But in the complaint, End Citizens United claims that No Labels is fraudulently misusing its tax-exempt nonprofit status. No Labels is not formally organized as a political party, but is openly preparing to possibly have a candidate for the next presidential election. In Michigan, nonprofits such as No Labels can raise large amounts of money without disclosing donors, but political parties cannot. Besides Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, End Citizens United sent a complaint to 26 other states. In response, No Labels officials say the complaint is, quote, part of a coordinated conspiracy to subvert No Labels ballot access and limit Americans' choices. Well, speaking of political parties, the Michigan GOP infighting continues as former President Donald Trump weighs in on who he thinks should be in charge of the organization. In a social media post, Mr. Trump, who is the leading Republican candidate for the 2024 presidential election, said he looks forward to working with Pete Hoekstra as chairman of the state party. On January 6th, a portion of the party voted to remove Kristina Karamo as chairperson. The Republican National Committee found that she was properly removed, but still Karamo continues to claim that she is the legitimate leader of the party. Former Congressman and ambassador to the Netherlands, Hoekstra, was named as her replacement by another vote. Well, looking now at the Michigan House, Democratic primaries in two special elections in the Detroit area were won by a county commissioner and a city councilor who will now go on to face Republican opponents in their Democratic-leaning districts in April. Two Democratic representatives stepped down last year after winning mayoral races in their hometowns, and that eliminated the party's two-seat majority in the House. There's been a 54-54 deadlock since. Mai Zhang, a second-term commissioner in Macomb County, and longtime Westland City Council member Peter Herzberg each won nominations on Tuesday. Mai Zhang will now face Republican Ronald Singer in the 13th House District race, and Herzberg will compete with GOP candidate Josh Powell in the 25th district. Coming up next, the Rundown's Jorma Duran talked with our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic about the open Senate seat in Michigan and candidates having money troubles. But first, Tim will tell us about some new poll results that show it's not just a race between President Biden and Mr. Trump in Michigan when it comes to the presidential election. Keep it right here. Welcome back. President Joe Biden may have won Michigan in 2020, but a repeat of that win is not a sure thing if you believe some of the polls. Our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic took a look at the numbers and whether or not any other candidates have a chance in the Great Lakes state.
Collective Out you just heard out of the White House today was based on the latest statewide polling data continuing to show President Joe Biden is in trouble in Michigan. The race is at 37% for Mr. Biden, 43% for Mr. Trump. But the newest wrinkle in the data shows that Robert Kennedy Jr. is getting 8% of the Michigan vote. Now, that's not enough for him to win, but it is surely enough to cost Joe Biden the election here. Mr. Biden needs every Democratic vote he can get, but other polling data recently shows that young Democrats are not on his side, and he's in trouble with independent voters to boot.
There's a particular problem Joe Biden has with young Democrats, Democrats under 40. They have essentially abandoned him, and he's got to figure out a way to win them back. The second mountain he has to climb here is with independent voters. And we all know in Michigan, they're the people who make these decisions.
The Biden camp, however, is looking at the numbers that suggest if Mr. Trump is convicted of a crime, 58% would not vote for him, but 35% still would. And that's why the legal team for Mr. Trump is doing all it can to avoid any judicial decisions on his conduct until after the election. Both candidates have unfavorable ratings under 50%. 44% for Mr. Trump are favorable. 39% feel the same way about the president. 6% say they are undecided. And check this out, 3% simply said, we're not voting.
Well, the Rundown's Jorma Duran talked to Tim Skubic about those poll results and how a third party could be a spoiler for the president's chances at getting Michigan's electoral college votes.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to help us out. Tim, you have the latest results of a new poll out with a few different results that included a race between President Biden and Donald Trump. What are you seeing?
Well, we're seeing that the continuing problems for Mr. Biden continue as he is behind Mr. Trump. The interesting thing is both gentlemen are below 50% in the polls, but there's about a 6-point lead, give or take a couple, with Mr. Trump still in there. But the really fascinating thing about this report, Mr. Kennedy, the son of Robert Kennedy, is at 8 points in the poll. Now, people at home are going to say, yeah, 8 points, big deal. This guy's not going to win, and that's absolutely true. But here it is a big deal for Joe Biden. Those are 8 points, most of which probably would have gone to Mr. Biden. And if you do the math, add that 8 points, we have a statistical dead heat perhaps in Michigan, but we don't because of Mr. Kennedy's presence in this race.
What is your opinion, though, about polls? We've been kind of burned before, so how much, I guess, weight can we put into this one?
The pollsters are quick to say that a poll is only a snapshot in time, that you can only look at what happened in that photograph, and then where we get into trouble is the prognosticators and foolish people like me try to take that data and extrapolate to the future, which is a little dicey. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but it does give us a note that we have continuing polls now in Michigan that Mr. Biden is behind, and that really is the storyline, and that, based on the recent polls, is a fair conclusion. Does that mean he's going to lose? No. Does that mean he's going to win? We'll see.
Well, Tim, politicians are beginning to raise money now to compete to win a seat in November, but you have an update about James Craig. What did you find out?
Well, James Craig is not doing too well. While other people around the country and the state were raising millions of dollars, James Craig reported a grand total of ka-ching, $60,000. Not enough to win the U.S. Senate race in the Republican primary. This U.S. Senate race is probably going to cost, when you combine both parties together, well over $100 million. And if you got $60,000 in the bank, do the math on that one. Yeah. It's not even close.
Yeah, you're right about that. Tim, always great to hear and see you. We appreciate it.
And Tim Jorma, thank you. Coming up, some Republican state lawmakers held a public conversation on social media with each other about gender-affirming health care and it raised the possibility of banning it for everyone. We talked to some of those lawmakers, and we have reactions from Democratic representatives and Governor Gretchen Whitmer. All that and much more is coming up next. Welcome back to the Capitol Rundown. On January 26th, Republican state lawmakers from Michigan and Ohio participated in a live discussion on the social media platform known as X concerning gender-affirming care for children and adults. It made headlines nationwide because during the conversation there was talk of banning that care for adults. State Representative Josh Shriver of Oxford asked in the discussion about applying bans on gender-affirming care for minors and adults. He said the care is, quote, harmful across the board. The host of the space on X, State Representative Brad Paquette of Niles, told reporters he could be in favor of banning surgeries that alter a person's reproductive system.
Going to harm them, to cure mental anguish in the moment. I just have a lot of questions about that. No, my bills don't ban that any type of these procedures for adults. But I do question it, and that's where my colleagues are. But again, it comes down to science, and then upholding that precept, that medical precept of do no harm. That I think is the policy that we need to ensure is reminded of our medical professionals here in Michigan.
In a phone interview, State Representative Jonathan Lindsay of Allen said he falls more on the personal liberty side of things, saying even if he thinks a decision someone makes for themselves can be harmful to a degree, it could be allowed. And in an email to reporters, State Senator Tom Kuntz of Clare said he's against gender-affirming surgeries on children, but not adults. But Democratic State Representative Emily Devendorf of Lansing, who is Michigan's first openly non-binary lawmaker, described the discussion as offensive. They said more can be done at the state level to protect the rights of trans people to access health care.
So In Michigan, I would like us to put in a intentional effort to broaden our efforts to protect trans folks while those attacks are being waged. We do, of course, have civil rights protections now for our trans community when it comes to public services, when it comes to non-discrimination. We may have to pursue legal recourse and start to enforce the fact that we have a right to exist while we are pushing to ensure that we have the same health benefits as everybody else.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer also reacted to the social media discussion. In a written statement, she said she wants people to know that Michigan is a place that will fight for your freedom to be yourself. The governor went on to say, I am committed to vetoing any legislation that hits my desk trying to undermine those freedoms. Coming up next on the Capitol Rundown, former President Donald Trump and former Ambassador Nikki Haley are on the road looking for support for their presidential primary campaigns. But first, we'll tell you what President Biden had to say when he made a stop in Michigan on Thursday. That and a lot more when the Rundown returns. Welcome back. President Joe Biden made a visit to Michigan on Thursday to celebrate his recent endorsement from the UAW. The president made an appearance at the UAW Region 1 building while about 200 pro-Palestinian demonstrators were outside. President Biden's schedule did not include any meetings with Arab American leaders. But in Michigan, Arab Americans represent a key voting bloc, and there's been frustration over his full-throated support of Israel in its war with Hamas. As for the UAW, Mr. Biden supported the union during last year's strikes against the big three automakers, even walking a picket line with members in Belleville.
We now have, in large part because of you and organized labor, the strongest economy in the whole damn world. We do.
The president also met with black faith leaders in Harper Woods outside of Detroit. The White House says Mr. Biden is planning a return to Michigan later this month to meet with community leaders to talk about the Israel-Hamas war. Well, as we've mentioned, President Biden could be facing a tough fight from Michigan voters in the November election. He won our state in 2020 and hopes for a repeat, especially after that UAW endorsement. Skylar Henry has the latest on the 2024 race for the White House.
President Biden arrived in a critical battleground state. Days after a valuable endorsement from the United Auto Workers, Biden met with union members in Detroit.
Labor built the middle class, and the middle class built the country.
Competing for the working class vote, former President Donald Trump met with the Teamsters on Wednesday. But the powerful labor union has not yet announced an endorsement.
Stranger things have happened. Usually a Republican wouldn't get that endorsement. For many, many years, they only do Democrats, but in my case, it's different.
Trump supporters are turning their attention to the upcoming South Carolina primary and the matchup with the last candidate fighting him for the Republican nomination.
It's a great day in South Carolina.
After losing in Iowa and New Hampshire, Nikki Haley is pinning her hopes on her home state, focusing on her achievements as South Carolina's governor.
We made South Carolina proud. It is time that we make America proud. And more than that, it is time that we make America normal again.
Even as she sharpens her attacks on Donald Trump, Haley faces an uphill battle.
Donald Trump, I think, is the clear favorite to win this state, in part because the Republican base is still very much in his camp, and they're the individuals that typically turn out to vote in a primary.
With a little more than 3 weeks to go until that primary, a recent poll shows the former president with a double-digit lead.
Coming up next, Vice President Kamala Harris is also touring the country. We'll tell you why she's on the road and what message she's trying to bring to voters ahead of November. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Capitol Rundown. The Biden administration is looking to rally voters around the issue of abortion. The vice president is crisscrossing the country through March to discuss reproductive care. And our Washington, D.C. correspondent Raquel Martin has more.
Vice President Kamala Harris is embarking on a nationwide tour to highlight a need for abortion care.
This is an issue of extraordinary consequence.
Harris argues since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, states with abortion bans have put countless mothers in danger and left doctors scrambling.
I've met women who have had miscarriages in toilets, tried to get emergency care, and were turned away.
She says making matters worse,
The top 10 states with the highest rate of maternal mortality also have abortion bans.
Are you also talking about potentially trying to work across the aisle?
There's a lot of work to be done.
Harris kicked off this re-election year tour in California. And last week she was in swing state Wisconsin, which now has a 20-week abortion ban.
Her next stop, Georgia, has a 6-week abortion ban. Georgia Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff supports the visit.
It's a pleasure to host her in the Peach State.
Anti-abortion groups call the effort a distraction.
Frankly, they've got really nothing else to run on. I view it as reproductive fear-mongering.
Emily Aaron Davis is with Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America and was among the thousands at this year's pro-life march in Washington.
Everyone was saying, look, we are not going to give up. We are going to continue to fight for life.
That includes pushing Congress to pass a national abortion ban that all states would have to follow. Polling shows while the majority of Americans oppose abortion after 23 weeks, they also do not support a 6-week ban. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.